Thank you. Okay, so today's topic is texting and driving, and I'd like to thank Rav Micha Cohn, who posts wonderful halachic questions and sources on the internet, and that's who I am using today. Okay, so before we get to the main sources, there is a general concept called Dina de Malchuta Dina, which means the law of the kingdom wherein you live becomes law, becomes Jewish halachic law. Okay? And therefore, I know I saw the question was posed to Rav Scheinberg about speeding. Is it halachically forbidden to speed? Right? Now, Dina Machut Dina, if it's going against our laws, then we don't follow those laws. Meaning, if the whole San Francisco initiative, right, which never quite made it even to a referendum or about whatever it's supposed to be, but if they were to outlaw circumcision, Brit Milah, we would not say, oh, that's the law. But we're talking about within the civil society, and they have certain laws, so we are obligated to keep those laws. Dina de Malchusa Dina. And therefore, though one can argue, let's say by speeding, which is how Rav Scheinberg was quoted, that the Dina de Malchuta, the law, would not be what's posted, but actually what is kept, what is enforced. So on the 405, I have yet to see anyone going 65 miles an hour. I think it would be a hazard to go 65 miles an hour. You're going to get rear-ended.
You have to go slowly.
Yeah, even that's pushing it, right? So if there is an accepted speed which the police don't enforce, beyond that, so then perhaps that would be the Dina Malchusa Dina. But when it comes to texting, that is something that the police are very, very focused on and very, very strict about. And he quotes here, the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration reported that in 2012, driver distraction was the cause of 18% of all fatal crashes, with 3,328 people killed and crashes resulting in injury with 421,000 people wounded. Now, text messaging creates a crash risk 23 times worse than driving while not distracted. In most states, texting or cell phone use while driving is illegal. Okay. So let us go through a little bit of the halachot, some of the Gemara. We're going to go through actually inside, which we had going through inside a teshuvah from Rav Avadi Yosef. Now the teshuvah, his halachic responsa, was not about texting, but it was about a case where a driver fell asleep, and that caused tremendous damage. And then we will make the correlations to texting. So let us begin on the page, not this side, but this side of the notes. First of all, we have the Gemara in Baba Kama, which tells us, a person is not allowed to have things in his possession, in his domain, which can cause damage to others. From how do we know that one should not raise a kelev ra, a vicious dog in his house? Val yamid sulam ra'ua, don't even have a shaky, unsteady, unsafe ladder in your house. Shneimar, it says, Lo tasim damim b'veitecha, don't place blood in your house. So it's saying not just anything which could potentially lead to damage, to a death, to harm being caused, you should not have it. The Gemara Tamid tells an interesting story which gives us a little bit of a glimpse about the idea of falling asleep. Tamid deals with the day-to-day service in the Beit HaMikdash. And we begin there in Hebrew and also down in English, those who prefer the English. Tanan Hatam, we learned over there, Ish Har Habayit. The Ish Har Habayit is the person who was in charge of the Har Habayit. He was the CEO of the Har Habayit, making sure everything was functioning smoothly in the Beit HaMikdash area. Hayamechazer kol mishmar mishmar. The Mishnah, we learned there in Talmud that there were different shifts of Kohanim who would stand guard. Now, it wasn't really guard in terms of protection. It was more of an honor guard. Think of England and those soldiers who stand there never moving, right? They won't be very good at guarding if they can't move, right? But it's more of an honor. So he would go around Kol Mishmar Mishmar on each place, location, where there were these mishmarot, these shifts. Va'avuko tolko lefanav. And there were torches that would go before him. They call mishmar she'ena omeid. V'amalei, any mishmar, any guard, any shift that does not stand up and say to him, Ish, Harabayit, Shalom Alecha, man of the Harabayit, peace be upon you. He doesn't respond in such a way, Nikar Shehu Yashen. Then you know what's happening? He's asleep on the job. Chovto b'maklo, and he would give him a hit with his staff. Or Shutaytalo Listrov Ekasuto. He even had permission to light his shirt on fire.
You said the word machlo?
Sorry? Makalo, makel. Staff.
I was just thinking of the story of Esther and the one of the men, Machlon.
No, yeah, that's...
Nothing. Okay,
yeah.
I get it. Forget it.
Right? So he would hit him with his makel, and he could even light his garment. The Haim Omrlo, and people would say, Makol Ba'azara, what are those sounds I hear from the courtyard? Oh, Kol Ban Levi Loka. That's the sound of the tribesmen of Levi getting hit. Ubigadav Nisrafin, and his garments being burnt. Sheyashalo ala Mishmar, that he fell asleep on the job. One time I encountered my mother's brother, Yashan, who was asleep, a sarfak suto, and they burnt his garment. It actually happened, he said. Abba said, Ki Rav Yochanan would come across this teaching. Amar Hachi, say as follows. Ashreyan l'rishonim. How fortunate, how uplifted are those earlier generations. Shafilo al ones shina. You see how responsible they were for their actions. That even for falling asleep, which is an ones, it's something that's beyond our control. Osindin, they're going to be held responsible. They're held responsible. Even if they fell asleep, they dozed off. Now we know when we're exhausted, you can't help but doze off. It's impossible to keep those eyelids open. Right? So how much more so will we be held responsible for things that are not in onus, that are not something that happens beyond our control. So I mentioned before, let's learn, turn the page over now, let's learn through together a teshuvah, a halachic responsa from Rav Avadi Yosef about a case that happened. Was there a question? Yeah.
Just a quick question. Back to what you had said earlier in terms of a person owning something that can potentially hurt someone. So what if a person in their home owns protection for their house? Weapons.
Okay, so a gun, as long as it's properly stored away, is not going to do anything, right? Mm-hmm. A dog, right, has a life of its own,
sure,
right? It has a will of its own, and if you have a pit bull which acts like the way pit bulls are, I know some people get very offended. The pit bulls are the nicest dogs, but which acts the way pit bulls are often described as acting, then chances are, right, you've got something dangerous in your house, right? A ladder is something that will not be under lock and key, right? You might be planning on fixing it, whatever, but it's dangerous. But as long as the person has it properly secured, there will not be any problem with having a gun. So let's go through this teshuvah together. Sheila, it was asked. Odot Reuven. The case happened. Reuven shishlam lechonit b'geishon so bala Haifa. Reuven had a car and was going to drive to Haifa. Ushcheino Shimon and his neighbor Shimon. Afu b'geishon so la Haifa. He also wanted to go to Haifa. B'geishon Reuven shichachenu imo b'mechonito. He asked Reuven for a ride. Vayaskin, and he gave him a ride. And the Emsan is in the middle of the ride. Reuven was overcome with sleep. And iratu nakasha, there was a serious accident. Shimon was injured seriously. And he had a hospital stay for about a month. And there were very high doctor bills. And now that he is hechlin, that he's better, tavat Reuven. He wants Reuven to pay him to meir ripoy v'shevet, to compensate him for the medical costs and for his lost wages. Reuven toain shaya ones. Reuven claimed, listen, as the Gemara said, ones shina. I fell asleep. You can't control that. I'm not held responsible. V'lo nitkavein lahazik. Right? He had no intention to cause any harm. And he doesn't owe him anything at all. That was the question that was posed to Rav Avadi Yosef. Teshuvah. And he responded as follows. Hine b'shulchan aruch. In the code of Jewish law, Choshen Mishpat, there are 4 parts to Shulchan Aruch. Choshen Mishpat deals with monetary laws. Adam shchavel b'chaveiro, ein magvin dayanim, she'enam smuchim eretz Yisrael nezek b'tzar, aval shevet v'ripoy magavin. Okay. Starts off saying as follows. First of all, if one causes damage to someone else, there are 5 different categories of payment that one must pay. Nezek, the damage done. Tsar, anguish. Ripoy, the doctor's bills. Shevet, workman's compensation. And boshet, any humiliation the person might have undergone. So Shulchan Aruch says that the nezek and the tsar cannot be collected can only be collected by dayanim, right? If you have dayanim who are not smuchim, who do not have the proper smicha, then you cannot collect the nezek and the tsar, but the shevet and the ripoy you can.
But it's only smicha in Eretz Yisrael.
Yes. Yes.
Right. Then you have a smicha outside of Israel.
Yes, but our smicha nowadays is not the smicha that is being demanded. The Ramah says there are those that say even ripoy and shevet cannot be judged, even the doctor's bills and the missed wages. You know, Yadu Hashem Tosim Kedivim Maran Ashulchan Aruch Gamadin Imamanus. Ve'ena muchsak yachol lomar kimli mishkakei negem Maran. Yesh lebeitin lahaskil latviha now. So first of all, Beit Din should get involved. We rule the Shulchan Aruch in this case, and the Beit Din should get involved in this case. So it is a case which they can hear, and then the question is it a case where the person is actually obligated to pay or not? The second paragraph there mentions okay. Now, that is according to the Shulchan Aruch, which now the Sfardim will follow. The Ashkenazim normally follow the Ramah. So therefore, he says, being that both of the people involved in the case here were Sfaradim, and they're going to be following the Shulchan Aruch as opposed to the Ramah, therefore it is something that we can hear. We'll see at the end that even the Ashkenazim poskim also agreed in the same way. Hine, we learned in Bava Kama, Adam Muad La'olam. When we're discussing damage done by an ox, so we have to determine, is it a shur tam or a shur muad? Is it a non-goring ox that happened to have gored this time, or is it a goring ox? And if it's a goring ox, then it's fully responsible for any damage that it causes. A person is considered muad. A person is considered not goring, but established as fully responsible. The difference is, if I have a non-goring ox, I, the owner, have no way of knowing. Why would I have thought this was going to happen? right? But once it's been happening, then I must take full responsibility. Well, an adam is muad la'olam. A person is always considered fully responsible for his actions. Bein b'shogeg, bein mezid, bein er, bein yashan. Whether it was intentional or accidental, whether it was while he was awake or he was asleep. If a person damaged his friend, he's chayv Hashem, he needs to pay full damages, whether it was shogeg or whether it was onus. Now, in a case where it's a complete onus, there's nothing I could have done, it was a complete fluke, then the person will be exempt. Now, in this case over here, what would we say? A person falling asleep while driving at night, is that an avoidable onus accident or an unavoidable accident?
Avoidable.
Avoidable. Why? How?
You can stop by the road and go to sleep.
Okay, we'll come to that soon and make things even worse.
That's my contribution. See?
Good. And to make things even worse over here, it was clear that Reuven, the driver, did not sleep properly the night before he took this trip. That's why he fell asleep by the wheel and caused the accident. And it says in the Yerushalmi, in the Jerusalem Talmud, there they discuss a teacher who's got to be awake, who's got to be articulate, and he has to be focused, that he can't be up the whole night before. He can't be up more than if he's teaching the next day, he can't stay up later than his usual the night before. Why? Because the next day he'll be lazy, he won't be energized in his teaching, he might fall asleep. And therefore it's called Tchilato b'pshia v'sofo ba'ones. Important halachic concept. If I started off negligent, even if in the end an accident happened, I am considered liable. As it says in Bamitzia, okay, right? And then, okay, we differentiate. Here, this is considered a common occurrence, right? Actually, with this particular driver, it's happened before that he has fallen asleep at the wheel and has caused accidents, right? Now, certainly, right? I'm sorry, I'm not sure if it's clear. He's saying we read about it in the newspapers, we hear it on the radio. We all know that people fall asleep at the wheel, and that causes terrible, terrible accidents. Therefore, you can't say that this is an onus that's not shchiach. See, even if you want to say that in the end it wasn't his fault, right? He fell asleep, and you can't control that. But what led to him falling asleep? The fact that he didn't sleep well the night before. He didn't prepare beforehand. So that's called tchilato b'pshia. He started off with negligence, and at the end, what will it be? Even if in the end it'll be an accident, he is considered responsible for that. Now, we might argue and say, look, I did you a favor. Did you pay me for this ride? You haven't paid me for the ride. I did you a favor. You can't come back to me now claiming I owe you money if a favor that I did for you went awry. And we actually have such a din. In the classic case of shomrim, those who are guarding something for someone else, if I'm being paid, I'm a shomer sachar, then my degree of responsibility and culpability, if anything happens, is that much higher. If I'm a shomer chinam, and it got stolen or I lost it, I'm watching it for you. Where is it? I lost it. Where you lost it? I don't know where it is. But you were watching it for me. There the answer is, if you paid me, then I lost it is not an answer. If you didn't pay me, so you get what you paid for. Right? You had a shomer chinam, right? If it got lost, it got lost. Sorry. So should we apply that over here? Should we say, look, didn't pay the guy for the ride, right? You got what you paid for, right? You took a chance. So he says, "V'ritiv or zarua shekasam nearly shechayiv shem lefor leruvein hoil upasha v'yasham." Right? Since he was negligent and he fell asleep, because certainly shina pshiyutahi, falling asleep is negligence. Right? It's negligence. Right? So he brings a case. Let's say I hire you to guard my merchandise in the store at night, and you fell asleep, and the guy slept for a couple of hours, and during that time, guess what happened? It wasn't in Irvine. Okay, everything got stolen. So there, the Torah Even writes that's considered Geneva. In such a case, even if he's not getting paid, he's chayiv. If I'm hiring you to guard it at night, then inherent in that agreement is you're not going to go to sleep. You're going to stay up. And therefore, it is like I hired you not to sleep. And you slept, so therefore you will be chayav. Similarly over here, if you're driving at night, whether you're getting paid or not, the clear understanding is that when you're driving, you take responsibility and you won't be sleeping. So granted, people fall asleep at night beyond our control. But that is considered pshia if you're hired or if you're doing something at night, even not being paid for it, which clearly demands non-sleep. If you bring about a situation where this happened beyond your control, then that's not considered beyond your control. Right? When he went to sleep, right? It's not considered onus gomer. He brought that about. But in a case where the person he didn't go to sleep, the sleep overwhelmed him, bevadai onus kazeh, right? There's someone, right? That's an onus gomer, and he should be pater. In the case of the guys guarding the store, but here is considered that he is on the verge of negligence. Why? Because he didn't sleep properly beforehand. Menas, that's why it happened. And that's what caused the accident. And certainly when he started to feel tired, what should he have done? What Uzi said. At that point, you're starting to feel tired. It doesn't just happen, bang, you're driving, you're fine, and then all of a sudden you're asleep. You start to feel drowsy. You feel the eyelids. You sense it. At that point, what should he have done? He should have stopped. Pulled over. Lanuach Ezazan rested a little bit until he knew for sure he's able to go, continue on. And the person's traveling with him, he has that person's life in his hands. Beautiful what he says over here. Why does a shomer sachar? Why is a person being paid? So we said before, his responsibility goes up. Why? Why does his responsibility go up? Because he's being paid for it. Okay, see, he says, well, having someone's life in your hand raises your responsibility level even more than getting paid by someone to do something. Having someone's life in your hands is a greater cause of your being responsible than had he paid you $10 to drive him. So don't say he's a shomer chinam.
It seems also that it could be applied to people that weren't in the car. Anytime you are driving, you have a responsibility to
100%. 100%, right? It's not just you, it's anyone else over there. But over here we're talking about a very practical case where A is demanding money from B. So a reason to say that the driver might be patur, exempt from payment, is he wasn't getting paid. Well, it's the payment that raises the responsibility level, and here having this passenger's life in your hand certainly even more so raises the responsibility level, and therefore he will be chayiv. It's considered it could have led to a person's death, right? And therefore falling asleep is like actively going and causing damage. Umatzati, I found Bishal Sirius V'Yan David from Chaim Yosef David Weiss. Shedan ba'orach b'nidan nidan ve'ela gankin chayv senag. He had a similar case, and he also concluded that the driver is responsible. Kidin adam hachovel, like a person who goes and wantonly goes and causes damage. Ubeprat b'niduno. In the case the case that he dealt with was a long trip. New York to Montreal. New York to Montreal is about how many hours?
12.
Is that many?
New York.
I think a little less. I think to Toronto is 11, 12. Yeah, 5, 6, 7. Certainly
really?
a good trip. That's going straight. 8 hours? Yeah.
Yeah,
Sheshala nosim et hanahag. In the case there, the passengers asked the driver, "Im yashan kol tzaracho lefnei hanesei rucha kazot." Have you slept properly in preparation for this trip? V'yavtiach lahem sheyashan kol tzarach, and he assured them that he had slept the proper amount of time. Ula'achish b'toch hanesiyah nirdam el hahega, and then in the middle of the trip, what happened? He fell asleep by the wheel. V'yirat tuna kasha, and there was a terrible accident. V'niftzeu kama me'anosim, and many. Thank you so much. And many of the passengers actually were injured. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam she'akol nהיה b'dvaro.
Amen.
And then afterwards, hodesh lo yashan klal. He admitted afterwards that he had not slept at all. And therefore, he obligated him to pay like a person who goes and willfully causes damage.
Because he defrauded them by his
The
statement.
siyem ukol makom nira shekol nahag hayashan be'emtza nesiya. Right, and his conclusion there was any driver who falls asleep in the middle of the trip, the garam la'ason, and causes injuries, damages, danger, hu chayab b'tashlumin, he's obligated to pay, ela im kain, but he had this caveat, unless kafatz alav choli, unless a sickness overcame him, upitom nafla alav tardema, and he fell into a sleep right away. You know, a person had, I don't know, I'm not sure what.
Sleep apnea.
Sleep apnea.
Narcolepsy.
Maybe an epileptic fit.
Yeah.
Yeah. Sleep apnea, I think, just makes you more tired, but I don't think it makes you it doesn't just shut the lights.
Narcolepsy.
Right?
Or
Shalo ba'ashmuto, that was beyond, that he was not responsible for. The yadu, and it's known, shalefi chok hamalchut, right? We read about this in terms of truck drivers, right? By law, according to the laws of the kingdom, mishlo yashan chol tzarach asur linhog, right? A person, you have this with pilots, you have this with truck drivers, and they have not slept. They must have a certain amount of time in between trips in order to sleep.
That's what they have on airplanes. They have bedrooms for the pilots.
Yeah. Vanosea imo damo barosho. And whoever travels with such a person, Damo barosho, right? If you know, right, or his blood is on his head, let's say. Now, Vatshuva Hanal Nishlachal Hagon, Harav Shmuel Halevi Vazner. This was sent to Rav Vazner. Lachazot Dato, to hear his opinion on it. Veheshiv, and he responded in his tshuvos called Shevet Halevi. Shebevadai binidon hanal shaitan nesia arucha. Certainly in that case there, where it was a long trip, the karov l'tchilat hanesia ira ha'ason, and he fell asleep close to the start of the trip. Shenira ba'aliyah, therefore it's very clear shemenei shelo yashan maspik kodev nesia ira ha'ason. It's very clear that he did not sleep properly in preparation, that's what caused it. He fell asleep by the wheel. That's certainly considered negligence, and he's obligated. However, Rav Vazner wrote, if it was a long trip, and it happened towards the end of the trip, where it's possible, had he slept properly before the trip, a proper amount. Nevertheless, he still, by the end of the trip, could have fallen asleep. There, Rav Vazner writes, there it's hard to say that it's something that is close to pshia, to negligence. What would you guys say about that? Agree or disagree? Rav Vazner says that in that case, he fell asleep at the beginning of the trip. There, he clearly did not sleep properly leading up to it. That's negligence. He is obligated. He's responsible. But let's say it's at the end of a long trip that he fell asleep. There, it's hard to say that it's negligent because even a person did sleep properly. We know what it is. You're driving for a long time, day or night. It makes you drowsy. You get somewhat hypnotized by, certainly at night. So there, he says, it's hard to call it negligent.
Well,
agree or disagree? Disagree. What do you say? Let's hear who agrees, who disagrees.
I disagree, yes, I disagree.
Disagree. What do you say?
Disagree.
You disagree. Why?
Well, no, I'm saying I agree that it's not negligent.
Okay,
Yeah.
so you want to agree with Rav Vazner.
Yeah.
Then in such a case, okay, why are you guys disagreeing?
No, I understand like him. I agree what he said, but I disagree for the oh my God, I lost the word. The behavior of the person
Okay.
who is taking the trip or responsibility.
Okay, irresponsible. What do you want to say?
So, someone who takes trips would know this tendency, and they should plan a break and to walk and to refresh themselves.
Okay, okay.
And also, too, it would depend. I mean, it might be a priori. You can't say that the person was negligent, but if the person, in fact, did not, like in this case, sleep well and happened to luck out and keep themselves awake till very close to the end, the risk goes up the longer you're driving.
Okay.
And so
I hear. Ken?
maybe if they slept properly, it was that they didn't structure the trip right.
Mm-hmm. Ken?
You go back to what Uzi was saying before. You can always pull over to the side
Yeah.
and take
So
it
let's
out.
hear. Good. Let's hear what Rabbi Yisroel said. Ulam, according to what we wrote before, even if the person made it through and fell asleep towards the very end of the trip, adainu nechshav posheya. He says, I would still consider him to be negligent. Why? When he started to feel himself being drowsy, he should have pulled over and sleep a little bit. When you're really, really tired, there really is that power nap, that 5 minutes that you take. Right, is amazing. When I was living in Israel, so I was learning in Yerushalayim, and I was dorm counselor at a yeshiva, and I was dorm counselor every night till 1 o'clock in the morning. So I get home and get to sleep at about 1:30, and I was up by davening was, I forget exactly what time it was, probably about 7 or 7:30 was davening. So it was it was a bit tight. And I had a chavrusa, And he knew that at a certain point I can get really tired. I can try to fight it, and I'm going to be fighting it for the next hour and a half, and not really be sharp. Or at the time that I'm really tired, if I put my head down for 5 minutes, I'll fall asleep, I'll wake up, and I'll be good to go.
Wow,
Right?
fortitude.
Not fortitude, that's just how my body works.
It's
You
nice
know,
that-
if at the right time, when I'm really, if I just put my head down, I say to him, give me a tap in 5 minutes, and that was it. I was good to go. So as we said before, you should stop on the road and rest a little bit. V'achlif koach, and that way you'll have renewed strength to continue the ride until the destination. V'chein ra'isi laron ogav Rav Chaim David Weissanal, who that also Gan David Shagam im yashan had karov l'sof nesiyah, even if he fell asleep towards the end of the trip, yesh l'chayvo, he's responsible. Al shelo hifsik linhog ba'odo er, he should have stopped while he was still awake. When he felt that he was tired, that's when he should have rested and not have been overwhelmed by the sleep as he's driving. And he asked professional drivers. You don't, and everyone agreed, you don't just fall asleep suddenly, right, without feeling drowsiness. He should have been careful according to the length of the trip and the distance needing to travel. That's he's quoting him, and Rabbi Yosef says, and he wrote correctly, the driver must pay this passenger the medical bills and the missed wages. And also to ask forgiveness for all of the difficulty that he caused him, right, through this whole process. V'yimchol lo, and he should forgive him. So he should pay, he should ask forgiveness, and he should forgive him. Now that's all in the case of falling asleep. Okay? That's all in the case of falling asleep.
Question before we move on.
Yes.
So, what about the case where the driver actually lied and bore false witness, and later he confessed he didn't sleep when they had specifically asked that?
Well, he said he's chayiv.
Right.
He said he has to pay.
Right, but isn't there even a greater, because that was on the passenger.
You're not going to make him pay more than the damage he caused.
Well, would that be that he has to also atone before Hashem?
That's to him and God. That's, you know.
I mean, it seems like
Yeah, I would agree with that. But
There's not an additional charge
that's not what a beit din is going to.
of
That's
fraud?
not what a beit din. That's not what a beit din. Look, a beit din is not going to rule that this guy needs to do teshuvah,
okay.
right?
Okay.
And he's not going to have to pay more than the damage he caused, or the weight,
That
or
makes
the.
sense, but there's not an additional, like, criminal charge that he defrauded them?
No, the beit din is not going to do criminal charges. Beit din does not have criminal charges. The beit din is going to
Only
decide.
Sanhedrin would do criminal charges. Okay.
Now, here we're talking about falling asleep. So you are losing control, you're distracted because of conditions beyond your control, right? There, it could be considered an onus, something beyond his control, and according to Rav Yosef and the other poskim quoted here, it's not considered an onus, right? Now, if that's the case when it comes to falling asleep, here we're talking about I'm fully cognizant, I'm fully aware, I'm fully awake. And what do I decide to do? I decide to pick up my phone and start trying to see those little buttons there to start hammering out a text message or even reading a text message. There's no ones shina. There's no aspect of falling asleep. I didn't know, I wasn't in control. Here we're talking about knowingly putting others into a dangerous situation. Right? Again, the NSC, speak on a cell phone while driving, reduces focus on the road by 37%. Virginia Tech Transportation Institute say that when you're sending a text while traveling 55 miles an hour,
Oh my gosh.
you're traveling the length of a football field basically blindfolded. That's what you're doing. You're going the length of a football field basically blindfolded. Right? And therefore, with all the discussion that they had up and back when it came to falling asleep, that all is far, what we're talking about here is far beyond such a situation. Right? It's close to an intentional homicide. Imagine a person's driving and decides to put on a blindfold. Right? Just for 10 seconds. As I'm going 55 miles an hour on the 405. Right? I'm just going to close my eyes. I'm not going to look at the road for the next 10 seconds. Right? For the next 10 seconds. Right? If you're going 60 miles an hour, so then, right, that's a mile a minute, 52.80, right? So in a matter of 10 seconds, you've traveled 520, almost 2 football fields in a matter of 10 seconds. In 5 seconds, in 6 seconds, right? In 6 seconds, you've gone a football field. Right? Imagine driving a football field blindfolded, with other cars whizzing by you at all different speeds. Either you past them past you. We never dream of doing such a thing. But over here, so it's not, this is a willful distraction that a person is taking upon themselves, and therefore halachically, the person would be fully, besides the din of malchuta dina, therefore rendering it something that's not permissible, but from a halachic point of view, the person is fully responsible, monetarily, fully responsible for any damages that are done. You go.
So, referring to that 55 miles an hour, there was a case a few years ago where girls were driving home from cheerleading practice from high school in Texas, and the girl was texting and she was going 60 miles an hour, and she hit those semi-trucks, and the car blew up, it incinerated at that speed, just by texting. She was sending her mom a text telling her she was going home.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's so tempting because we...
Train last year.
I'm sorry?
It was a train wreck last year.
The one in Philadelphia.
I don't remember where it was, where
There was one
here,
here in
the
LA.
conductor was texting.
Yeah, I think they just came out with that he wasn't actually.
He wasn't?
That he wasn't. I think they just came out with
A
that
couple
now.
of years ago when
that he
LA,
wasn't.
it was a metro.
In
train.
Chatsworth here.
Yeah,
in
Chattanooga,
Southern
yeah, a
California.
couple of years ago.
Yeah.
And
A couple of
okay,
people died.
Yeah.
So
You know-
my question is on this then, we know the full culpability because it's a free will, but you say it's tantamount to like almost a...
Intentional homicide.
Right, and halachically. So, aside from being liable for damages, you say the Beit Din would never bring charges, but if halachically we have a precedent for that, shouldn't there be some mechanism legally for...
So our Beit Din nowadays can deal with monetary matters.
Only.
Monetary matters that both people sign up to.
Okay.
Right? Right. Yeah. Right. Now, we live in a world which has gotten so wired, and the expectation is, that we respond quickly, and we ourselves need to know, we hear the text coming in, oh, who is it?
No.
What is it? Right? And the world that we live in allows us to put ourselves into this frenzy of, I've got to respond immediately. I've got to know who it is. I've got to know what's happening. I've got to respond. But over here we're talking about, I love that example they gave of doing a football field blindfolded.
Mm-hmm.
Right? You put into that context, you realize just how dangerous it is for yourself and for others, and just how asur, how forbidden it is, and on a halachic level, full responsibility. With all the up and back that we had about falling asleep, right? That is when you are overcome by sleep, right? We're never overcome by a text unless we decide to overcome ourselves with it. Yes?
One of those data, the 37% just for cell phone, did they make a distinction whether that was just like hands-free Bluetooth, or what? If that was through your sound system?
Actually, what it says here is speaking on a cell phone while driving.
Right.
Right? And that's
So
even
any driving, even
that's
if it's hand-free.
even hands-free. Now, if the law is you're allowed hands-free, so we're not going to say that you're not allowed hands-free.
Right.
Right? But even when you are hands-free, right, it's not mind-free. And you're focusing to a certain degree. We have all this talk about multitasking. I forgot who said the definition of multitasking is doing many things at once, none of them all that well. That's what multitasking actually comes out to. Right? Our brains are not wired to be doing many things at once in a mindful, measured, thoughtful way.
I just a thought, I don't know if it has anything to do with legality, but our society is so concerned with health food and exercise and living longer and being better in all sorts of ways, and yet there's a contradiction. It's a healthy, strong person exercising all these things and then does these things with text messages, taking their life in their hands.
Yeah.
It seems they don't carry it out completely in all their actions.
Yeah.
So God has set this somehow, maybe set this up, I don't know.
Yeah.
Of course, God sets everything up. It just seems such an irony.
Yeah. And certainly even while driving and talking on the phone in a legal manner with your hands free, but to keep it, just to try to stay focused on the fact that you're not, focus on the third thing, right? That, to realize that hands-free does not completely resolve the issue,
right.
And to be sure to be paying more attention to the road than to the conversation. Okay, Dov? Thanks.
That's amazing, Rabbi. Thank you.